Hello, hello everyone. Good evening. Good evening. How hope everybody is good. जो भी ये सेशन अटेंड कर रहे हैं उन सबको हेलो. हाउ आर यू ऑल? आई थिंक पीपल विल कीप जॉइनिंग इन बीच बीच में. तो थोड़ा बहुत मैं तब तक अपने बारे में बताती हूँ. ये जो सेशन आज हो रहा है 9 PM अबाउट अबाउट आंसर्स फॉर योर मेंस, उसके बारे में थोड़ा सा बताएंगे. तो लेट्स बिगिन. सो इन दीज लाइव सेशंस, दीज लाइव यूट्यूब सेशंस, I, Dr. Ekta Jain Sethi, am here on behalf of Srirams IAS. And at Srirams IAS, we hope to deliver the best of content, the best of guidance, the best of methods and methodology for you to prepare for UPSC. तो UPSC एक वी ऑल नो बहुत बड़ा, बहुत डिफ़िकल्ट एग्ज़ामिनेशन है. इस एग्ज़ामिनेशन के लिए आप सबने बहुत मेहनत करी है, बहुत मेहनत करोगे. कई लोग अब इस बार इसका मेंस लिखेंगे. तो लिखने के लिए ये वाला सेशन हमारे लिए और ज़्यादा ज़रूरी हो जाता है, बिकॉज इन दिस सेशन वी आर गोइंग टू पर्टिकुलरली टॉक अबाउट राइटिंग. okay, how do you attempt answers, how do you write answers for your mains? Okay, now I am Dr. Ekta Jain Sethi. As I told you, I am here on behalf of Srirams IAS. My specialization is sociology, so I am a sociology educator, and other than that I have always worked with UPSC aspirants in general. So I have a fair idea that how do you appear for the paper, what is required from you, how should you take things, how should you, आप कैसे कोई क्वेश्चन आता है तो उसमें आपको क्या चीज़ है जो सबसे पहले स्ट्राइक करनी चाहिए, क्या चीज़ है जो आपको टैप ऑन करनी चाहिए. तो क्योंकि मैं UPSC से रिलेटेड हूँ, इन चीज़ों से रिलेटेड हूँ, इसलिए इस बारे में हम लोग आज थोड़ी सी बात करेंगे. लेट मी टेक यू टू द प्रेजेंटेशन. Yes, I think this should be visible to you all. Answer writing for UPSC. So even though we'll talk about topics जो sociology related topics हैं, आपके मेंस के ही टॉपिक, बट related to sociology, स्टिल जो आपको टिप्स मिलेंगे, जो आपको एक्चुअल आइडियाज़ मिलेंगे, मोर और लेस वो आइडियाज़ आपको सारे आंसर्स में, आपके GS 1, 2, 3, 4 सारे आंसर्स में, आपके ऐसे में फॉर एग्जांपल हेल्प करेंगे. ठीक है, आज हम इनमें से थोड़ी कुछ चीज़ों के बारे में बात करेंगे, कुछ चीज़ें जो बचेंगी उनके बारे में हम नेक्स्ट सेशन में बात करेंगे. सो बोथ द सेशंस फॉर ऑल ऑफ यू हु आर एमिंग फॉर UPSC मेंस राइटिंग, बोथ दीज सेशंस आर गोइंग टू बी वेरी फ्रूटफुल, इम्पॉर्टेंट सेशंस हैं. सो प्लीज़ ट्राई एंड अटेंड दीज सेशंस. साथ में मैं आपको एक और बात बताना चाहूँगी, जो लोग भी इंटरेस्टेड हैं, आपके फ्रेंड्स, आपके पेयर ग्रुप, उनके साथ प्लीज़ शेयर करिए. एट श्रीराम्स हम लोग बहुत सारे बैचेस ऑनलाइन लाए हैं. ऑलरेडी कई बैचेस चल रहे हैं, कुछ बैचेस अब स्टार्ट होंगे. तो उन्हीं में से एक बैच है सोशियोलॉजी का, सोशियोलॉजी ऑप्शनल का. एंड वी आर बेसिकली गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट पेपर 1 एंड पेपर 2, बोथ द पेपर्स, पेपर 1, पेपर 2 इन सोशियोलॉजी ऑप्शनल. और ये जो बैच है ये 31 जुलाई से स्टार्ट हो रहा है. 31 जुलाई से ये बैच स्टार्ट हो रहा है. सुबह 10 बजे से होगा. 3 आवर की क्लासेस हैं. एंड इन दीज 3 आवर्स हम लोग थ्रू आउट द टर्म, थ्रू आउट द स्केड्यूल, हमारा एम है पेपर 1 एंड पेपर 2 पूरी तरह से कंप्लीट करना. जिस तरह से ये क्लासेस कंडक्ट होंगी उनमें बेसिकली आपको हम एक टॉपिक लेंगे, हम उस टॉपिक के ऊपर डिस्कस करेंगे, वो टॉपिक मैं आपको समझाऊंगी, आपके जो भी क्वेश्चंस हैं हम वो डिस्कस करेंगे. एंड बाय द एंड आपको एक PDF मिलेगा उस टॉपिक से रिलेटेड. PDF होगा कंप्राइजिंग ऑफ नोट्स फ्रॉम वेरियस रेफरेंसेस. सो इन अ वे आपको बहुत सारे रेफरेंसेस को अलग अलग जाके पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, वो सारे आपको एक अमेलगमेटेड, एक जॉइंट प्लेस में मिलेंगे इन फॉर्म ऑफ दिस PDF. ऑल्सो हर PDF में एट द एंड होंगे एक क्वेश्चन बैंक. ये क्वेश्चन बैंक बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि कई बार क्या होता है, हम लोग पढ़ लेते हैं पूरा कोर्स एंड हम सोचते हैं एक बार पूरा कोर्स हो जाए, या एक बार ये पूरा चैप्टर हो जाए, एक बार ये पूरा यूनिट हो जाए, उसके बाद मैं इसके क्वेश्चन सीरीज़ के क्वेश्चंस देखूंगा या देखूंगी. इस चीज़ में कि उसके बाद हम ये करेंगे, उसमें कई बार क्या होता है, हमारा जो कंटेंट है हम वो और क्वेश्चंस रिलेट करना भूल जाते हैं. तो इन क्लासेस में क्योंकि ये क्वेश्चन बैंक आपको साथ के साथ मिल रहा है, क्लास में जो कुछ हुआ है आप उसको डायरेक्टली उन क्वेश्चन से रिलेट कर सकते हैं. ये रिलेट करना बहुत ज़रूरी है, और ये आप लोग जो राइटिंग करने वाले हैं अब आंसर्स की, आई एम श्योर आप लोग ये बहुत अच्छे से समझ गए हैं, आप लोग ये बहुत अच्छे से जानते हैं कि दिस इज़ इम्पोर्टेंट, राइट। तो इस चीज़ की प्रैक्टिस आपको इस कोर्स में शुरू से ही मिलेगी, फ्रॉम योर वेरी फर्स्ट क्लास आपको ये प्रैक्टिस मिलेगी। चलिए, सो हैविंग सेड दैट, आज हम इन जनरल मेंस के जो क्वेश्चंस होते हैं, किस तरह से आपको क्वेश्चन आंसर राइटिंग करनी चाहिए, क्या चीज़ें आपको ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए, क्या नहीं, उनके बारे में थोड़ी सी चर्चा करेंगे, थोड़ी सी बात करेंगे। तो लेट्स सी, ये है जो कोर्स मैंने अभी आपको जिसके बारे में बताया, जुलाई 31 से ये स्टार्ट हो रहा है, सोशोलॉजी ऑप्शनल का, बोथ पेपर 1 एंड पेपर 2। आई डॉक्टर एकता जैन सेठी, आई विल बी अ सोशोलॉजी एजुकेटर ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ श्रीराम्स। प्लीज़ फील फ्री टू यूज़ दिस कोड। आपके जो भी फ्रेंड्स हैं, जिन लोगों को भी सोशोलॉजी ऑप्शनल में इंटरेस्ट है, जो डिटेल्स हैं कोर्स की वो पब्लिश हो जाएंगी, वो नीचे सेक्शन में आपको वो लिंक दिए जाएंगे, प्लीज़ डू गो चेक इट आउट। एंड जो ये कोड है श्रीराम्स, उसको यूज़ करिए, यू विल गेट अ गुड डिस्काउंट, बिकॉज you need to save on your money, and along with that our aim is that you save on your hard work, you save on your emotional investment. So that is why through these sessions, जो ये live sessions हैं, उनमें we are constantly trying that we will give you the important tips, important things that you should know. चलिए, I told you ये bilingual course है in English and Hindi, and both paper 1 and paper 2 are going to be covered from 31st July 10 AM onwards. Now about myself, फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट कौन बोल रहा है उसके बारे में जान लीजिए, क्योंकि आपको श्योर होना चाहिए कि ठीक है सही इन्फॉर्मेशन आप तक आ रही है या नहीं। सो मैं सोशोलॉजी से रिलेटेड हूँ। सोशोलॉजी वाज माय पेपर इन कॉलेज इन एट LSR दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी। आई वेंट ऑन टू डू माय PhD फ्रॉम जवाहरलाल नेहरू यूनिवर्सिटी JNU, and I've been a gold medalist in humanities in my school, Maharani Gayatri Devi School, Jaipur, and I've done work in different spaces as a researcher. I've taught in these premier institutes, and as I was telling you, I have worked with students in different fields, and especially with UPSC aspirants. So now it's been more than 10 years in fact that I've been involved with teaching and focusing on UPSC. सो आई ऑनेस्टली बिलीव कि जो भी ये चीज़ें हैं, जैसे आज जो ये सेशन है बहुत ज़रूरी है फॉर स्टूडेंट्स हु आर अपियरिंग फॉर मेंस, एंड ये जो चीज़ें हैं ये सेशंस के साथ साथ, ये कोर्स के साथ साथ भी होनी चाहिए। एंड दैट इज़ वाई इन माई कोर्स आई एम जनरली मेकिंग श्योर दैट आंसर राइटिंग आपकी साथ साथ चले, राइट। तो हम लोग क्वेश्चन होता है, हम वो क्वेश्चन डिस्कस करते हैं, हम वो क्वेश्चन लिखते हैं, एंड उस क्वेश्चन पे आई गिव माई फीडबैक। मेनी अ टाइम्स उसको री राइट किया जाता है, सो दैट कॉन्फिडेंस इन राइटिंग क्वेश्चंस डेवलप्स। ओके, सो दैट इज़ अबाउट मी। नाउ लेट्स सी व्हाट डू वी हैव अहेड। नाउ टू बिगिन, फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट लेट्स सी GS जनरल स्टडीज़ का जो पेपर है UPSC का, इट इज़ कंसिडर्ड टू बी वन ऑफ द टफेस्ट एग्जामिनेशन गाइज। सो जो भी वहाँ पे प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं, जो भी इस पेपर के लिए प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं, फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट गिव अ पैट ऑन योर बैक, गिव अ पैट टू योरसेल्फ गाइज, क्योंकि आप लोग एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पेपर अटेम्प्ट कर रहे हो, एंड एक इम्पॉर्टेंट पेपर है तो उसकी तैयारी भी अच्छी होनी चाहिए, उसके प्रिपरेशन भी सही तरह से होना चाहिए। तो आपने कई क्लासेस अटेंड की होंगी, कई क्लासेस अब आप लोग सोच रहे होंगे अटेंड करना। सो इन दैट चेन ऑफ थॉट, दिस इज़ वन क्लास इन विच वी विल डील विद राइटिंग। हाउ डू यू राइट आंसर्स, हाउ डू यू अप्रोच आंसर्स, ओके, हाउ डू यू अप्रोच अ क्वेश्चन। नाउ फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट लेट्स सी, फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट you will have your papers. How are your papers divided? So first and foremost, you of course have your compulsory, your paper A, paper B, then for your writing, and that's where we will become handy, these classes will come handy. First and foremost there is essay. Now essay में जो writing है, आप बोलोगे essay में sociology educator का क्या रोल, तो अभी जब हम आंसर राइटिंग करेंगे यू विल रियलाइज दैट कई चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जो आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं व्हेन यू आर अटेम्प्टिंग पेपर 1, व्हेन यू आर अटेम्प्टिंग essay, ओके, बिकॉज किस तरह से आप क्वेश्चंस देखते हैं, पिकिंग आउट ऑन द वर्ड्स ऑफ द क्वेश्चन। सो देर आर सेवरल important words when you see a question like examine, comment, substantiate, there are many more, elaborate, justify, explain, और भी बहुत से ऐसे वर्ड्स होते हैं जिनसे वी जनरली सी द क्वेश्चन फॉर यूपीएससी मेंस. ऑल ऑफ दीज आर कॉल्ड योर पॉइंटिंग वर्ड्स, ओके, योर क्वेश्चन वर्ड्स. इन सब के अलग अलग मीनिंग होते हैं. तो अगर एग्जामिन लिखा है क्वेश्चन में, हाउ विल यू लुक एट इट. ऑन द अदर हैंड अगर जस्टिफाई लिखा है क्वेश्चन में, तो हाउ विल यू अप्रोच इट. कहीं ना कहीं जो कंटेंट है वो सिमिलर होता है, पर उस कंटेंट का जो फ्रेमिंग होता है, दैट फ्रेमिंग ऑफ द कंटेंट चेंजेस, एंड दैट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड. ओके, सो वी विल लुक एट ऑल दीज वर्ड्स ऑल्सो, एंड वी विल सी हाउ all these words help you to understand and help you to attempt a question. Then you have paper 2, that is GS. This is mostly related with your history, geography. In this also sociology का जो content है, sociology का जो way of attempting answers हैं, that comes handy. This of course paper 3 is quite connected with what you have in sociology. तो इनफैक्ट कईयों के पास, जिनके पास sociology optional है, उनके लिए ये वाले जो topics हैं ये comparatively थोड़ा सा उनको knowledge इसके बारे में already भी होता है, so it becomes easier for you to even attempt it. So all these topics which are mentioned here in your paper 2, 3 and 4, so GS1, GS2, GS3, all of them they have a great overlap with sociology, right? And because of this overlap, जिस तरह से आप sociology के questions attempt करते हैं, उससे बहुत similar हो जाता है way for attempting questions here in GS, here in your mains. Okay, then of course moving on, there is paper 4, 5, 6, okay, and 7. Now moving on, so I've already told you about the pointed words, and we'll take these words one by one. Examine, justify. आज मैं आपको बस ये words दिखाई हूँ, and just remember them. Remember them, and we will be talking about these and more. ठीक है, ये थोड़े से हैं, हम इनको और इनमें और words add करेंगे and उनके बारे में फिर discuss करेंगे. Okay. Now the very first thing, ये एक इमेज यहाँ पे डाली गई है, राइटिंग. दिस शोज राइटिंग, राइट? राइटिंग इज इम्पॉर्टेंट, राइट? Many a times, and especially for people who are a little scared, who are a little nervous about writing, for them this becomes even more important. Practice. For all of you who are preparing for UPSC mains, your answer writing begins the very point, at the very instant when you have started reading, when you have started preparing for the exam. Why? Many of you will say कि मैम पहले let us complete the course, then we will write, right? But वैसे नहीं होता. You need to keep both these things together. You need to keep writing along with your reading, along with your understanding the concepts, because only through practice you will be able to take hold of the paper in different ways, and उसको हम कुछ parts में divide करते हैं. First and foremost, through practice you are going to understand your speed. I'll talk about all of them in detail, but you'll talk about your it will help you to tackle your speed. Secondly, कोई भी चीज़ जब हम बहुत करते हैं, जब हम बार बार करेंगे या कुछ, तभी हमें बहुत श्योरिटी आती है, कॉन्फिडेंस आता है. ऐसे ही तो किसी चीज़ में कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं आ जाता. तो कोई भी कॉन्फिडेंस बिल्डिंग के लिए यू नीड प्रैक्टिस. कॉन्फिडेंस बिल्डिंग, ओके. कोई भी चीज़ आप ध्यान रखिए, एंड आई थिंक व्हेन आप लोग जब पढ़ रहे हो तब भी आपके टीचर्स ने, अगर आप ये कोर्स ज्वाइन करते हो, आई ऑलवेज से दैट व्हेनेवर यू आर रीडिंग, मेक नोट्स. Many a times, even if a definition is given in the PDF, I'll ask my students कि लिखो, just write down this definition. If I feel it's an important concept, if it's an important definition, I ask them to write it down. Why? Because writing makes you remember, right? So note making. Note making, राइटिंग मेक्स यू रिमेंबर, मेकिंग नोट्स मेक्स यू रिमेंबर कि व्हाट दिस कॉन्सेप्ट वाज. अगर वो वर्ड आप एग्जाम में देखते हो, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर आपने ग्लोबलाइजेशन पे बहुत अच्छे नोट्स बनाए हैं, ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बारे में लिखा है, एंड अ क्वेश्चन इज देयर इन द पेपर रिगार्डिंग ग्लोबलाइजेशन, देन यू इंस्टेंटली रिमेंबर कि अरे आई हैव रिटन अबाउट ग्लोबलाइजेशन in this and this diary of mine, in this and this space of mine regarding note, in this and this notes of mine, and I've talked about globalization in this context. आपको वो एग्जाम्पल भी याद आ जाएगा, आपको आपकी डायरी याद आ जाएगी, आपको आपके नोट्स याद आ जाएंगे. सो नोट मेकिंग बिकम्स इम्पॉर्टेंट. ऑल ऑफ दीज टुगेदर आर इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर अटेम्प्टिंग आंसर्स. Okay, now let's look at all of them in detail one by one and at other concepts. As I told you, practice. Is practice important? अभी आपको लग रहा है कि ऐसी हालत हो जाएगी क्या हमारी? नहीं, let me clarify, not really. This is to ensure that आपकी हालत ऐसी नहीं हो, you need to practice, right? You don't need to just scribble and remove things. You need to practice content. You need to practice putting content in words. Remember, there's a difference in scribbling something and actually making sense. ठीक है, यहाँ पे हम वर्क कर रहे हैं on making sense. That is the important thing. कई बार होता है कि एक क्वेश्चन आपके सामने है, you might not know the exact answer of this question. For example, take any welfare scheme. Now welfare schemes पे क्वेश्चन है, अब आपको उस पर्टिकुलर वेलफेयर स्कीम के बारे में आइडिया नहीं है, ठीक है, यू हैवंट रेड अबाउट इट, फॉर सम रीज़न यू आर नॉट एबल टू रिमेंबर इट, इट्स ओके, इट हैपन्स. डज नॉट मीन कि आप वो आंसर ही नहीं लिख सकते. हाउ कैन यू एक्चुअली, जो आपको आता है, जो आपके पास कंटेंट है, हाउ कैन यू राइट इट इन अ मैनर दैट इट कैन वर्क फॉर दिस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन. सो इवन इफ इट इज़ नॉट डायरेक्टली लिंक्ड येट, because you know how to frame your content, you will be able to write it in your words. So practicing that is important. Just practicing writing is not important. Practicing sensible writing is important. And उसके लिए कई बार शुरू में होगा कि आपकी राइटिंग में कोई सेंस नहीं मिल रहा, समझ नहीं आ रहा, it is not comprehensive, it is not, there is no context, sometimes something is missing, sometimes the concept is missing. It's okay. That will happen only with practice, right? Gradually from that not such a good answer, you will gradually come towards a sensible answer, right? Gradually you will become to you will come towards a good content, and that is necessary. Moving on, are there uniform writing tips? Now this is a little debatable. There would be many educators who would tell you, many guides who would tell you that the same thing works for all of you. ठीक है, पर्सनली आई टेल मी वन थिंग, आप लोग सब अलग हो, हम सब अलग हैं, तो हम सब के लिए सेम चीज़ कैसे वर्क कर सकती है? इट्स नॉट ऑलवेज, right? Not always. We all have our areas, we all have our specifications, and we all need to work on them. Now for someone, they might have the content, they don't need to work on their content, their content is all ready, but they need to work on framing of that content. How do I frame the content? राइट मेरे को आंसर में जो मैटर है मेरे को पता है, मेरे को ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बारे में सब पता है, पर वो मैं लिखूँ कैसे? इन दैट 150 वर्ड्स, इन दोज 250 वर्ड्स, हाउ डू आई राइट इट ऑल, राइट? सो दैट इज़ अ प्रॉब्लम फॉर समवन एल्स. दे नो हाउ टू प्रेजेंट देयर आंसर, they know very well कि no, I have to write a good answer, it should look good, it should be right, it should be पूरा मतलब एक अच्छा बंधा हुआ आंसर जिसे कहते हैं, well bound answer. I know how to put a well bound answer, but that person does not have enough content, right? So that person will start writing all rubbish. That person will write something from somewhere, something with जो कुछ और से, and globalization का main concept कहाँ है? कहीं नहीं, ठीक है? Now that person needs to work on their content, right? They need to start building on their content. तो उसके लिए even the study has to increase. So they need to first get their concepts right. They need to first get their basics right, and then they can start practicing on writing, right? This is just one example. Say someone else, for someone else, speed, they end up writing, they don't realize कि अरे टाइम जा रहा है, they don't realize कि इतना सारा content है, they don't realize आपके पास limited space है, limited words है, आप अपने सारे content को, आपके पास जो matter है उसको कैसे उसमें उसी word limit में how do you abridge it, how do you summarize it so that you don't miss out on anything? Making mental points, such a person will have to work on making mental points, right? By mental points I mean that such a person needs to know कि important words, important points क्या है. So अगर globalization की for example हम बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे feminization of work की अगर बात कर रहे हैं तो आपको पता है gender for example important है. तो gender के बारे में मेरे को क्या बोलना है, मेरे को मेरे दिमाग में रखना होगा. Then gender at work के बारे में क्या बोलना है वो सोचना होगा. कोई एग्जाम्पल मेरे को पता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल ऑल्सो सम स्कीम्स लाइक प्रेगनेंसी लीव एंड ऑल दीज थिंग्स, इनके बारे में मेरे को अगर बात करनी है आई हैव टू रिमेंबर दोज. ठीक है. देन हेल्थ इशूज़ एट वर्क, दोज थिंग्स आई वुड वांट टू टॉक अबाउट. सो दीज आर द डिफरेंट पॉइंट्स जो मुझे आई नीड टू रिमेंबर. आफ्टर आई रिमेंबर कि इतने पॉइंट्स हैं मेरे पास बॉडी ऑफ द आंसर में, अकॉर्डिंगली आई राइट माई इंट्रो and accordingly I'll give weightage to all these points. So मेरा intro कितना बड़ा होगा, उसके बाद मेरी body of the answer कितनी होगी, examples मैं कितने दे सकती हूँ. I might have a lot of examples, but can I write them all? If I end up writing all those examples, I will have no place, no time for writing conclusions. I will have no time for writing my other questions. जो आगे questions pending है उनका मैं क्या करूँगी. सिर्फ एक questions में तो full paper के marks नहीं मिल रहे, right? So उसका क्या. So I'll have to work on all those things. ठीक है. तो writing tips, कुछ writing tips of course है, मैं मना नहीं कर रही. I'm not denying that some writing tips are uniform for everyone. You all need to work on your structure of answers. You all need to have a good structure of answers. You all need to have, let me write this down for you, a good structure of your answers. All of you need to have good content of your answer of course. बिना कंटेंट के तो कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा. मूवी की स्टोरी लिख के नहीं आनी है एग्जाम में, तो कंटेंट तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ आंसर्स, मेनी ऑफ यू, कंटेंट सबके लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट है. आपका जो क्लैरिटी ऑफ राइटिंग वो सबके लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट है. कई बार क्या होता है, बहुत आंसर बहुत अच्छा है, सब कुछ बहुत सही है, बट जब वो आंसर हमें रिटन उसमें मिलता है, जैसे अभी अगर आप मेरी राइटिंग देखो स्टिल डिसेंट, बट अगर यही मैं ढंग से लिखूँ, लाइक इफ आई राइट इट प्रॉपरली, the neatness I'm saying, taking care of these things are important for all of you, right? These things will be important for all the students out there. So there are certain tips which are uniform, certain tips which are specific, so everybody has their own area on which they need to work harder. ठीक है. मेरा फॉर एग्जाम्पल एज अ स्टूडेंट ऐसा बचपन में भी होता था. एज अ स्टूडेंट में भी आपका मैथ्स वीक है, आपका इंग्लिश बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग है, सो इंग्लिश पे आपको वर्क नहीं करना, आपको आपके मैथ्स पे वर्क करना है एट द एंड ऑफ द एग्जाम, राइट? फॉर समवन इट्स द ऑपोजिट, right? So all of you need to find out that what is that area of answer writing where you lack, and you need to focus on those more. जनरल तो है, जो सबके लिए है वो आपके लिए भी है, बट यू नीड टू फाइंड आउट योर एरिया ऑफ लैकिंग. आपका एरिया ऑफ लैकिंग आप पहचानो एंड उसके ऊपर आपको ज़्यादा काम करना होगा. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन. नाउ दिस इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन. कैन वी लर्न आंसर्स? एंड ये कई बार मेरे से पूछा भी जाता है कि मैम ये वाले क्वेश्चंस बहुत रिपीटेड उसमें आते हैं, कांट वी जस्ट लर्न इट? यू कैन वेरी वेल लर्न आंसर्स, but tell me one thing, you are appearing for UPSC, you are appearing for one of the most difficult examination, right? Such a difficult examination, will they have such a loophole कि अगर आंसर लर्न करके आ जाए बच्चे और लिख दें तो उनको फ़र्क नहीं पड़ेगा? फ़र्क पड़ेगा, right? They realize, they can understand. So you can learn concepts, you can understand concepts, but you will have to frame your own answers, you will have to write your own answers, right? So you can't really learn answers, right? You can have certain points in your head, there's no harm in having certain points in your head, that always helps because it will help you to save time also, right? If you have already your ready points are there, you know it will take you lesser time to write such an answer, so you can do it. However, you can't learn an entire answer. You can have your points. have your points in place. However, you can't imagine that it will be fine with you कि अगर आप पूरे पेपर्स के सारे पेपर्स के आंसर्स लर्न करने लग जाओ. नहीं, उतना ना आपके पास टाइम है, एंड दैट इज़ नॉट प्रैक्टिकल. यू विल एंड अप राइटिंग जेंडर इन क्लास, और यू विल एंड अप राइटिंग एग्रेरियन रूरल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन में आप सोशल जस्टिस लिख दोगे, तो दैट डजंट वर्क. सो यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड, you need to get clarity on your concepts first and foremost, and you need to know कि उन concepts को के लिए कौन से important words हैं, कौन से important themes हैं. Those of course you have to learn, those you should ensure that you know, and then you can put those themes, you can put those concepts in words in your answers. Moving on. Another very important concept. Now this is again a very important bit, and this is about time limit and speed. This is one thing on which many students they kind of face problem, they kind of face challenges, right? Time limit and speed. So you have a certain number of questions in your paper, you have to attempt those questions. आप एक ही क्वेश्चन पे अगर अपना मैक्सिमम टाइम, मैक्सिमम अटेंशन दोगे, हाउ आर यू गोइंग टू मैनेज? हाउ आर यू गोइंग टू मैनेज? दैट इज़ अ मेजर प्रॉब्लम, राइट? सो टाइम लिमिट एंड स्पीड इज़ रियली इम्पॉर्टेंट. हाउ डू यू राइट योर आंसर? अगर एक आंसर, एक वेरी फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, लेट्स स्टिक टू आवर एग्जाम्पल्स जो हम बात कर रहे हैं जिन एग्जाम्पल्स की, अगर लैंड रिफॉर्म्स पे कोई क्वेश्चन है, तो लैंड रिफॉर्म्स आपको बहुत अच्छे से पता है, यू कैन राइट द आंसर वेरी वेल, इट्स अ वेरी कंप्लीट आंसर दैट यू हैव इन योर हेड, एंड आप लिखने लग गए. नाउ बिकॉज हमको इसके बारे में इतना अच्छे से पता है दैट यू विल कीप राइटिंग दिस क्वेश्चन, एंड एट टाइम्स यू फॉरगेट दैट अरे आगे भी है, आगे भी देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन. सो यू हैव स्पेंट अ गुड डील ऑफ टाइम ऑन दिस वन क्वेश्चन. This happens, and this happens with everyone, and this is okay. Not always, but this is okay. ठीक है? It's only the thing is कि अगर आपके साथ ऐसा कुछ होता है, so for your next questions you need to know, you need to be aware that how do I make up for my lost time. Okay, that is where you will win. It's okay if you have lost a lot of time on one question, but you need to be aware about it. You need to be aware that you have done this, and उसके बाद आप जो आपके आगे के questions हैं उनमें you will have to save on that lost time. You will have to save on that lost time. Okay? अगर ऐसा नहीं होता है then of course by the end you are in a problem. You are आपके पास एक challenge वाली situation है आपके सामने wherein you have less time and your questions are still pending. Right? So always remember, and ये वाला जो चीज़ है, ये जो चीज़ है आपकी time limit और speed, ये practice से solve हो सकती है. Practicing, and when you practice, time yourself. By timing yourself, I don't mean that you only time yourself in context of the entire paper. Time yourself for each answer. ठीक है? How much time did you take on each answer? If for 150 words answer you are taking, say शुरू में you will take 10 minutes. Gradually with practice that 10 minutes will come down to 8 minutes, gradually to 6 minutes. That has to be your practice level. Right? And so keep timing. Time yourself for all questions. That how much time you have spent on which topic, answering what kind of question. That is important. Okay? And with practice, you will be able to work on this time. ठीक है? आपका टाइम धीरे धीरे कम होएगा क्योंकि आपने धीरे धीरे प्रैक्टिस किया है. So that is about your time limit. सेकेंड फैक्टर जो इसमें इम्पॉर्टेंट है, एंड दैट इज स्पीड. अगेन दिस इज़ वन थिंग विच यू विल इम्प्रूव विद प्रैक्टिस. ठीक है? कई बार हमारे पास सारा कंटेंट है, हमारे पास पूरा प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ आंसर भी अपने माइंड में रेडी है, सब रेडी है, बट जब हम लिखने लगते हैं, एंड दिस हैपन्स विद मेनी पीपल, बिकॉज नाउ स्पेशली विद टाइम व्हाट हैज़ हैपेंड, वी हैव लॉस्ट द आर्ट ऑफ राइटिंग. How many of us actually write diaries? How many of us actually write letters? No. Nowadays we are typing. Continuous typing चल रहा है मोबाइल पे, continuous आपका वर्क चल रहा है ऑनलाइन गूगल पे, तो हमारा फ्रेम ऑफ राइटिंग ही चेंज हो गया है. राइट? सो स्पीड गेट्स अफेक्टेड. स्पीड बहुत अफेक्ट होती है उससे, एंड दैट इज़ वाई दिस इज़ अगेन वन एरिया, वन इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्टर ऑन विच यू ऑल शुड कॉन्सेंट्रेट एंड ऑल ऑफ यू शुड वर्क ऑन, ठीक है. एंड दिस कैन ऑल्सो हैपन विद प्रैक्टिस, ठीक है. तो शुरू में कई बार टायरिंग लगता है, कई बार डिफ़िकल्ट लगता है, कई बार नेक्स्ट टू इम्पॉसिबल लगता है कि अरे नहीं हो पाएगा, बट देन विद प्रैक्टिस आपकी टाइमिंग इम्प्रूव होगी, विद प्रैक्टिस आपकी स्पीड इम्प्रूव होगी, एंड दैट इज़ वाई बाय द एंड ऑफ योर पेपर you should have enough time with you to go through whatever you have done. I am not saying कि हर चीज़ आप word by word पढ़ पाओगे by the end, but at least you will be able to check कि आपने क्या सारी चीज़ें जो आपको अटैम्प्ट करनी थी क्या आपने अटैम्प्ट की, राइट. बचपन में जब स्कूल में हम एग्ज़ाम के लिए प्रिपेयर करते थे, आंसर अटैम्प्ट करते थे, तब भी तो चेक करते थे कि क्या मैंने सारी चीज़ें अटैम्प्ट की, कहीं इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन में 20 मार्क का भूल के तो नहीं आ गई. तो सबसे ज़रूरी वो है कि बाय द एंड यू शुड हैव एटलीस्ट दैट मच टाइम दैट यू कैन चेक इफ़ यू हैव अटेम्प्टेड ऑल द क्वेश्चंस प्रॉपरली इन ऑर्डर. ऑलवेज मेंशन द क्वेश्चन नंबर स्पेसिफिकली, ऑलवेज मेंशन द क्वेश्चन नंबर प्रॉपरली. आप कौन सा आंसर अटेम्प्ट कर रहे हो प्लीज़ वो क्लियर रखो, ठीक है. एग्जामिनर आपके पास उतना सा ही टाइम है, वो खुद देख के नहीं देखेगा कि अरे कौन सा एग्ज़ाम क्वेश्चन इस बच्चे ने अटेम्प्ट किया. प्लीज़ राइट द नंबर प्रॉपरली, नीटली, ठीक है. अ जेन्युइन रिक्वेस्ट. वन मोर थिंग हियर आई विल लाइक टू ऐड फॉर ऑल ऑफ यू इज अलॉन्ग विद नंबरिंग, अंडरलाइनिंग पॉइंट्स. ये कई लोग बोलते हैं, कई एजुकेटर्स बोलते हैं कि इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स जो होते हैं आपके आंसर में अंडरलाइन कर दो, ठीक है. अब उसमें क्या होता है, कई बार स्टूडेंट्स दे स्टार्ट अंडरलाइनिंग एवरीथिंग. यू विल स्टार्ट अंडरलाइनिंग एवरीथिंग यार. मतलब आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट यू आर वेरी पैशनेट अबाउट द आंसर, यू हैव स्टडीड रियली हार्ड, मतलब आपने दिन रात लगा दिया इस क्वेश्चन में, इस क्वेश्चन की आपको सारी चीज़ें इंपॉर्टेंट लग रही हैं, ठीक है. बट एग्जामिनर का तो सोचो, आपका जो एम है अंडरलाइनिंग का, the aim to underline is ताकि the examiner can see the important words, the examiner can grab the important words, and the examiner will be able to explain you, will be able to give marks, because the examiner will understand अच्छा student ने पढ़ा है, राइट. तो एग्जामिनर को उतना समझ आ जाए वो अंडरलाइन देख के. पूरा ही आप हर दूसरी चीज़ अंडरलाइन कर रहे हो तो उसमें इंपॉर्टेंट क्या है. आप खुद को इमेजिन करो, आपके पास एक पेपर आता है, न्यूज़पेपर होता है ना, न्यूज़पेपर में हेडलाइन होती है, हेडलाइन का जो फॉन्ट होता है सब होता है थोड़ा अलग होता है, जो न्यूज़ का आर्टिकल होता है वो थोड़ा अलग होता है, राइट. क्यों? सो दैट थ्रू द हेडलाइन यू नो व्हाट इज़ गोइंग टू बी देयर इन दैट आर्टिकल एंड व्हाट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट, राइट. नाउ इफ एवरीथिंग इज रिटन इन दैट फॉन्ट, नथिंग इज, कोई भी चीज़ का वो इम्पोर्टेंस ही नहीं रहा, right. So underline the important words, underline the important points, but only the important ones. Don't end up underlining all your answers, guys, ठीक है. Now these are things, as I was telling you, these are things जो generally जब आप पढ़ रहे हो, आपकी जो जब आप स्टडी स्टार्ट कर रहे हो, आपका जब भी आपने जो बैचेस जो भी पढ़ाई स्टार्ट की है उसके साथ साथ आपको इन चीज़ों पे वर्क करना चाहिए. एक बार एग्ज़ाम आने लग गया, आपका पूरा कोर्स हो गया है, तब आप इन चीज़ों पे प्रैक्टिस करोगे तो फर्स्टली आपके पास उतना टाइम नहीं है, सेकेंडली यू विल फील कि अरे अभी तो मेरे को ये रिवाइज़ करना है, अभी तो मुझे ये क्वेश्चन सीरीज़ करनी है, अभी तो मुझे इसके क्वेश्चंस देखने हैं. सो यू डोंट हैव द टाइम फॉर ऑल ऑफ दिस, right. So ensure that when you start preparing for UPSC, at that very point of time you start practicing your answers. And that is what we will be doing in our batch. I've already told you the batch for sociology optional, it is beginning from 31st July. 31st July से ये बैच शुरू हो रहा है. Now only a few days left and we will be dealing with both paper 1, optional paper 1 and optional paper 2 in this batch. And I've told you the format of the classes कि classes कैसे ली जाएंगी इस बैच में. And जो भी लोग इंटरेस्टेड हैं, अगर आप लोग इंटरेस्टेड हो, आपके फ्रेंड्स इंटरेस्टेड हैं, आपके पेयर्स इंटरेस्टेड हैं, प्लीज़ डू चेक आउट द लिंक्स विल बी शेयर्ड सून इन द सेक्शन बिलो, एंड डू चेक देम आउट, डू चेक दैट हाउ द एंटायर कोर्स इज स्केड्यूल्ड. पूरा कोर्स जो एक्चुअली सोशोलॉजी ऑप्शनल की जो कोर्स आउटलाइन है अकॉर्डिंगली स्केड्यूल किया गया है. सो वी आर नॉट लीविंग एनीथिंग, हम सारे टॉपिक्स कवर करेंगे. एंड द पॉइंट इज़ टू कंप्लीट ऑल दोज थिंग्स सूनर, ताकि आपके पास अगेन इनफ टाइम होता है प्रैक्टिस का. तो साथ साथ तो प्रैक्टिस होएगी ही क्वेश्चंस की, बट इवन आफ्टरवर्ड्स यू हैव इनफ टाइम फॉर प्रैक्टिस. ओके, now these were few of the pointers which you should know before beginning your answer writing journey. Now we come to the more detailed bit. And this is about structuring your answers. Okay, now we are going to talk about structuring your answers. How do you actually structure your answer? Every good answer, you know, I've already given you the words may be different, but all good answers will have a certain structure. It may change here and there, but largely जो होता है, the structure remains the same. And how do you see that structure? It's written here. First and foremost will be your introduction. First and foremost is your introduction is very important, guys. Many a times क्या होता है, हमें क्वेश्चन मिला, फॉर एग्जांपल लैंड रिफॉर्म्स में क्वेश्चन मिला, कोई पर्टिकुलर लैंड रिफॉर्म के बारे में डिस्कस करना है, हमने डायरेक्ट वो डिस्कशन स्टार्ट कर दिया, डिस्कस, द आंसर एंड्स विद डिस्कस, एंड डायरेक्ट यू हैव स्टार्टेड विद द डिस्कशन. ओके, एटलीस्ट गिव एन इंट्रोडक्शन, give a 2-line introduction, if nothing, 2 to 3-line introduction about what is land reforms, what do you understand by land reforms. Okay, and then you move on to the particular act, particular policy. Okay, you can't directly begin with it. मतलब land reforms तो हमने भूल गए, हम डायरेक्ट उस पे आ गए, नहीं. You give an introduction, then will be your main body. Yeah, then will be your main body. Now this is the main content. Whatever your content is, that has to fit in this part of the answer. Okay, now there are 2 ways of writing this main body, more than 2 ways actually, but roughly 2, जैसा कि यहाँ पे दिख रहा है आपको. Firstly, in paragraphs. So firstly, of course, you can write in paragraphs. Okay, so you can talk about different land reforms, you can talk about a pre-British system of agriculture, then you can mention the British tenure system, when the British came, the new introductions in the land reforms that they did, and then post-independence land reforms, and then the contemporary times. You can write it in these kind of paragraphs. Okay, that is okay. Second is bullets. You can use bullets. Bullets are basically your pointers. Okay, I would always suggest that you can have a mix of 2 also. Mix of 2 में क्या करते हैं, a paragraph है, for example you are explaining say caste and class. Okay, you are explaining the relationship between caste and class. So you first talk about the relationship between caste and class in 2 to 3 lines, that these both affect each other. Okay, and how they affect each other, and then maybe in bullets you can give 2 examples, 2 to 3 examples you can give here. Okay, so you can have a mix also. Apart from bullets, many a time students also use, and that is again a very good habit, you can use flow charts. You can use flow charts, diagrams, tables. You can use all of these to elaborate your answer. Tables especially. Now, especially if the answer is, say differentiate between something, like say differentiate between caste and class. Okay, and आप फिर भी paragraph form में लिखे जा रहे हो, that is not a good answer. That does not make sense. The question clearly asks you to differentiate. As soon as the word differentiate is there, then you have to know that you have to get your table in place. You will write caste, you will write class, and you will talk about them in terms of the differences. Okay, in terms of thinkers, so at times say Marx, कहा जाएगा difference with someone like say Weber. So you will start talking about them in a tabular form. So tables again become very important. So students feel free to use any of these ways. You can use paragraphs, bullets, you can have a mix of these, use flowcharts wherever possible, use diagrams wherever possible, use tables, especially if the question asks you to. Don't write in paragraphs if the question is such which is asking you for tables. Okay. One more important point here in your answers which is missing from here, from this diagram, is examples. UPSC examination है. UPSC examination is an examination which expects you all to be updated. Okay, it expects you all to be aware of whatever is happening around you. And how can you show that you are aware? How can you display your awareness? इंटरव्यू तो बाद की स्टेज है, इंटरव्यू तक हम बाद में पहुँचेंगे, बट थ्रू योर आंसर्स यू हैव टू टेल द एग्जामिनर दैट आई नो दैट बिकॉज ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन व्हाट इज हैपनिंग, I know what pandemic effects were on agriculture or what pandemic effects were on exports, right? So, or I know the tribal identity, tribal quotient in the Northeast. I know about these things. I'm aware about these things, right? So, you have to use examples wherever you can. Make sure you use examples which are more recent. Make sure you use examples which are more current. And again, ensure that you are not using example just for the heck of it. आपका जो example है वो question से related है, ठीक है? Just because you know about a certain thing and वो question उसके बारे में पूछ ही नहीं रहा, still मैं लिख दूँ क्योंकि मुझे आता है, मुझे पता है. You don't have to show off your knowledge. Show off in the right way. Show off where it is required. If you show off where it is not required, जो भी आपने actual में content लिखा है आंसर का, वो भी honestly थोड़ा सा उसमें भी प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगा, वो वेस्ट हो जाएगा. तो आप लिखो, आप शो ऑफ करो अपनी नॉलेज को, बट एक प्रॉपर फॉर्मेट में, एक प्रॉपर ढंग से, ठीक है? सो यूज एग्जाम्पल्स, दैट इज मिसिंग हियर. सो ऑलवेज रिमेंबर, यू हैव टू हैव एन इंट्रोडक्शन, यू हैव टू हैव योर मेन बॉडी. मेन बॉडी मीन्स योर मेन कॉन्टेंट. दिस कॉन्टेंट कैन बी रिटन इन फॉर्म ऑफ पैराग्राफ, दिस कॉन्टेंट कैन बी रिटन इन टर्म्स ऑफ बुलेट पॉइंट्स. फील फ्री टू यूज डायग्राम्स, फ्लो चार्ट्स, tables. And you end up your body with examples बीच में भी आ रहे हैं तो well and good, but use them. And yes, towards the end, not to forget, has to be your conclusion. Towards the end has to be your conclusion. Okay, many a time students also do this कि क्योंकि पूरा आंसर लिख दिया एंड आंसर लिखने में इतना टाइम हो गया है, टेंशन हो रहा है नेक्स्ट आंसर का, तो जैसे ही आंसर का मेन पार्ट लिखा, आंसर ख़त्म एंड मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. ऐसा मत करो. एक दो लाइन कंक्लूजन की लिखने में आप बहुत टाइम नहीं बचा लोगे या बहुत टाइम वेस्ट नहीं कर दोगे, वो टाइम यूज़ ही हो रहा है, ठीक है? So ensure that you are writing a balanced conclusion. Now what do we mean by a balanced conclusion? Many a times there are opinionated questions in UPSC. Opinionated questions in UPSC means questions which require you to take a stand, questions which require you to think and answer, questions which require you to take a stand in terms of कि something has happened which is correct or incorrect, ठीक है? Clear stand लेना, ठीक है? तो लो, take your clear stand, justify your stand, but conclude in a balanced way. Okay, so whenever if you are taking in these opinionated questions especially, you should have a conclusion which is balanced, which is talking about the pros, the cons, everything. For example, if we talk like the effect of LPG, okay, effects of LPG. Now the LPG era had a number of effects, both positive, negative, and your answer needs to mention all of them. It needs to mention the pros, it needs to mention the cons, it needs to mention examples, and accordingly you can give a balanced conclusion. So that is how you come up with a balanced conclusion. Alright, so structuring of answer has to be very clear for you. तो किसी भी तरह का question होता है किसी भी paper में, you need to have an intro, you need to have your main body in the form of paras or bullets, flowcharts, diagrams, and you need to have examples, and you need to have a balanced conclusion. So there are all these 4 things which become important. Again, when I am talking about flowcharts and diagrams, please don't take me otherwise. जहाँ पे necessary नहीं है वहाँ पे मत करो, ठीक है. don't waste the page क्योंकि आपके पास लिमिटेड स्पेस है, उसको वेस्ट मत करो. जहाँ पे ज़रूरत नहीं है मत करो, जहाँ पे ज़रूरत है, genuinely you feel it will add to your answer, do it, because these things give you an edge. Another important thing here, let me write here only. Another important thing here is if you have any thinkers in your mind, okay, if you have any thinkers in your mind, mention them. Mentioning some thinkers here and there in your GS paper also shows that you are aware, also shows that you have read, also shows that you are prepared. तो आपकी जो preparedness है वो आप दिखती है एग्जामिनर को. तो अगर आपके पास कोई थिंकर्स हैं, लाइक से फॉर एग्जांपल अगर हम बात करें division of labor की, okay, and if I am talking about division of labor, I am talking about contemporary times and division of labor, but division of labor में I can always quote something from Karl Marx, right? I can quote something from Karl Marx and it will show that I have read Karl Marx. So even though this is division of labor in contemporary times, quoting Karl Marx in a minimum way will not be a problem. In fact, उससे add on होता है कि the student is well aware about the thinker Karl Marx, knows the works of Karl Marx, and it's not about Karl Marx only, in general about any of your thinkers. So if you know the thinkers, do write about them. If you know their works, even better, right? So thinkers and their works. By works I mean their books, their articles, any of these things. Thinkers along with their works is even better. So if you remember a thinker and you remember their work, do mention it. Don't feel कि अरे it's not required, मैं क्यों लिखूँ. It's like a brownie point, okay? It's a big add-on. Okay, so if you remember the thinker and if you remember any of their books or article, do feel free and you must write it in quote that this is this thinker in his work such and such. Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations. Okay, talked about whatever. So that way. So make sure that if you are using a thinker, if you are quoting a thinker and if you remember their work, you are writing that also. ठीक है, गलत वर्क मत लिख देना कि हमने एडम स्मिथ का लिख दिया कहीं और एंड किसी और का अमर्त्य सेन में अमर्त्य सेन का लिख दिया एडम स्मिथ में, ऐसा नहीं करना. ठीक है, मेक श्योर अगर आप कोई थिंकर एंड उनका वर्क लिख रहे हो दे कोरिलेट. ओके, सो that is how you will be able to structure a good answer. These are the things that I am telling you, like say underlining the right things, making use of flow charts, adding examples, especially current examples. If you remember a thinker, adding the name of the thinker. If you remember their work, adding their work. All these are really minute points, but these are the points which will help you to gain an edge. ठीक है, पढ़ा सबने है, आंसर सब लोग लिखेंगे. हाउ डू यू मेक योर आंसर अ लिटिल डिफरेंट, अ लिटिल बेटर, अ लिटिल elaborate, a little more complete. Okay, so these are the ways in which you can add on your brownie points. Okay, these are basically you're working for the brownie points in your answer. So remember the structure of a good answer and try to follow it when you are attempting any of these GS papers. Any of these, okay? So remember you can use them here. Remember you can use them here, okay? Essay is a different way of attempting, okay? We can talk about it later when we talk about it, but yes. Okay. Then moving on. Now before I go further and before we start taking some examples of questions, let's first see what we have done till now. Okay, so first and foremost, in your head you have to write down your points. Write down the points which you want to discuss. Write down the points which you want to elaborate. That is the most important thing. Okay, of course you have to have an intro, main body, conclusion. We already talked about this, that you have to have an intro, you have to have the main body of your answer, you have to have a good conclusion, a fitting conclusion, a balanced conclusion. use diagrams and flowcharts wherever required. Use diagrams and flowcharts wherever required, because it's not required, okay. Use diagrams and flowcharts wherever required. Again, don't use them irrationally. Use them where you actually feel it will make sense. So don't use them irrationally also, please. Try and attempt maximum number of questions. This is important, and that's why I told you that you have to work on your speed, and you have to keep in your head the time limit, okay, because you have to attempt maximum number of questions, right? Because many questions, your marks and everything will be dependent on these questions. So try and attempt most. Read and understand the question carefully. Very important point, guys. I haven't talked about this yet. I'll talk about it in brief right now, and maybe later we can discuss this. Read and understand the question carefully. Many a times this happens that, for example, the question is about division of labor. Okay, the question says something about, like, say, how division of labor has moved from simple to complex societies. Elaborate. Okay, division of labor sunte hi you feel that this is Karl Marx, and you start writing about Karl Marx. Okay, you've read the question, but you've not read it carefully, because here it is about division of labor between simple to complex. That means it will actually mainly be talking about Durkheim, another sociological thinker. So this is an example from sociology, but something like this can happen here also, right? So you have to read and understand the question carefully. कोई भी एक keyword देख के don't assume that this is what this question is asking. Read the question. That is it actually talking about this thinker? Is it actually talking about this concept? If it is asking about, say, they say globalization in contemporary times, or globalization and politics, and you are writing about globalization, sunte hi you are writing about LPG era, there's a problem. There is a gap, right? So you have to read, you have to understand the question carefully, and only then attempt it. Again, very important, do not give extreme views. So when I told you about a balanced conclusion, that is what it means, that many a times the questions will be such that they will ask you to take a stand. Okay, but when you are taking a stand for something, even there, and this is especially for ethics, but even otherwise, I'm telling you, if you are taking a stand in a certain question, ensure that you are also talking about the other side. Okay, don't totally be averse to the other side. Be averse se matlab hai, don't be totally negative to the other side. Write about both the pros and cons. Think about both the pros and cons and try to explain both the sides in your answer. Okay, you have to be diplomatic. You can't take a very extreme standpoint. Okay, you can justify your standpoint. Not to say that you can't. You can justify your standpoint. Still, it's always better to also give room for the other view. To always have that diplomacy that you can give the other view. You may not believe in it. Down the line, in your heart, you may not believe in it, you may disagree with this view. However, because this is an exam, this is an examination, you have to deal with it in a certain way. That's why here, try and give both the sides and do not take an extreme view. Use facts and substantiate your figures, your points with facts and figures. Another very important point, and as I told you that, for example, when you are reading, when you are reading anything to do with population studies, okay, try and read the recent reports. Crime, try and read the recent reports. Okay, try to remember the facts. Try to remember the crime rates in different cities in India. Try to remember that how it has increased over the years, how it has decreased in certain areas, literacy ratio. Okay, now these are certain figures, certain facts which you should remember, because you will be able to use them anywhere in your GS paper. Okay, so throughout they will be important. So these are certain common things, certain common facts that you should definitely try, and when you are making notes, there only keep one part of your notes for facts. Remembering facts, okay, and there start noting these things down. ठीक है, डिफिकल्ट होगा, बट अगर आपके पास एक पूरा ऐसा सेक्शन बना रहेगा आपके नोट्स में, सो इट विल स्टिल बी ईजियर. सो डू गेट दैट प्रैक्टिस इंस्टेंटली. ओके, डेफिनेटली दिस इज़ समथिंग जो मैं बहुत शुरू में बोल दी थी, यहाँ पे लास्ट पॉइंट है, पर ये बहुत ज़रूरी पॉइंट है, बहुत डिफरेंस पड़ता है इस पॉइंट का, एंड दैट इज़ वाई ऑल्सो आई ऑलवेज टेल माई स्टूडेंट दैट प्लीज़ प्रैक्टिस एंड इन प्रैक्टिसिंग ऑल्सो आई टेल देम, अगर आंसर बहुत ख़राब दिखता है मुझे तो मैं कई बार बोलती हूँ कि री राइट, देखो वापस, उसके बिना आपका हैंड राइटिंग नहीं सुधरेगा. हैंड राइटिंग हैज़ टू बी नीट, इट हैज़ टू बी रीडेबल. सब कुछ लिख दिया बट सामने एग्जामिनर को समझ ही नहीं आ रहा, तो हाउ डज इट मेक सेंस, right? So please, it is important that you try and work on your writing, and that can happen when you begin practice answer writing sooner, right? Because you need to have time to improve on things, okay? And it's never late, however it's better to start early, right? So in my batch generally we keep doing this answer writing practice together with our classes. So usse the students also get enough time and enough confidence that how they can attempt questions even if they haven't read about it, even if they do not have uske upar notes, still how to attempt it. ठीक है, तो नया बैच जो है वो 31 जुलाई से स्टार्ट हो रहा है. I've already told you 31st July sociology optional, that's the new batch which is beginning. It's a bilingual batch, and the 3-hour classes will be held from 10 a.m. onwards. We'll have a short break in between, and the format of the classes and everything I've already discussed with you all. So please, if any of your friends, any of your colleagues, anybody is interested, do share this important information with them also. Here is the flyer. Here you can see this, and do let them know that they must make use of this code. It will be for their benefit. Let's see. Okay, so these are the points that you have to remember while writing answers. Okay, now we are looking at the structure of the answer in detail. So we just discussed it in points, now we are going to look at it in detail. So because we have discussed it already, it will not take time. So let's see what it is about. I've already told you there has to be an introduction. Remember, the introduction has to be brief. Don't start elaborating the introduction. If you start elaborating the introduction, no elaborate introductions. See guys, it's a very simple thing. If you start elaborating on your introductions, you will not have time to actually concentrate on the main part, and main part क्या है, body of the answer. तो body of the answer के लिए आपके पास time ही नहीं रहेगा, आप सिर्फ introduction elaborate कर रहे. So it is basically a very brief statement of your answer. However, it is not generic. It is not just a generic comment. Okay, it should make sense. Try and be brief, but you must tell the examiner that आगे examiner को क्या मिलने वाला है in this question, in this answer. ठीक है, the examiner needs to get a vibe, the examiner needs to get a feel that the student has at least understood the question. Okay, so be brief, but you must let the examiner know this. Then of course, this is the main idea of the question that we call thesis. So the main body is made of thesis, antithesis and synthesis. This is your main body which we had been discussing. This is the main body of your answer. Okay, thesis is of course the main idea of the question. It is the critical analysis. It can be explained in parts. It's an extension of the thesis idea above. In theoretical questions, you must mention the methodology. In questions of methodology, mention theory. So all of these things have to be mentioned in the thesis. Antithesis are the counter arguments. So for example, if it's about the applicability of land reforms, so you say that how they acted, how they panned out over time, their effects, the positive effects that they brought, the different types of land reforms. You are talking about all of this. Up next to it, you will write the loopholes, you will write the drawbacks, you will write the problems. That will become here, that will be your counter arguments, and those will become part of your antithesis. So your argument and your counter argument. अगर कोई चीज़ के बारे में डिस्कस करने का बोला गया है, say for example entire question of entire tribal question, the tribal question of identity, the recent conflicts going on, so say the Manipur conflicts. So you will be talking about the Manipur conflict. You will give the situation. You will talk about the demands, the whatever is happening, whatever the entire tussle between the Kuki and the Metis tribe, the problems thereon, the challenges that they are facing, right? So you will be talking all of these things in pointers. Okay. Then you have your antithesis. Antithesis, as I told you, counter argument. So even if you do not want to elaborate the negative part, you don't want to elaborate something, the cons, still at least give some part. Also, why? Because remember, here this is not only about sociology. In general, you do not have a very absolute truth in UPSC in your answers, right? It's not mathematics. In mathematics, you know 2 plus 2 is 4. In general studies, in general sciences, 2 plus 2 is not necessarily 4, right? You'll see that why is it 4? Is it always 4? Right? There are a lot of questions associated, right? So the existence of absolute truth is not there in social sciences, in general sciences, and that is why you must try and give different perspectives, and not only argument and counter argument. You may also be in a position to give multiple arguments. So what we say in sciences, what we call it is multiplicity of perspectives. So this multiplicity of perspectives is important. In fact, it is this multiplicity of perspectives that is going to give you an edge, that is going to give your answer an edge over other answers. द सेम पर्सपेक्टिव, सेम कंटेंट सबके पास होगा. आप उसमें क्या ऐड ऑन कर रहे हो, क्या कोई नई चीज़ बोल रहे हो, कोई नया आर्ग्यूमेंट ला रहे हो, कोई नया पर्सपेक्टिव ला रहे हो. दोज आर योर ऐड ऑन्स, दोज आर योर थिंग्स विच आर गोइंग टू अर्न यू मार्क्स. Okay, so remember about multiplicity of perspectives and try and write different viewpoints. Okay, and yes, the synthesis is when you are writing about the entire picture. So you have written the pros, you have written the cons, and then you are writing about the actual general idea about the pros and the cons. How do you see them together, that what is actually better, and then you conclude with some examples, and especially if the examples are from India, it's great. However, not necessary. If they are from India, of course, it's again it's a better thing. However, if these are in transnational, international examples also, even those work. If you can use them for Indian perspective, even better. However, otherwise also it's okay. Okay, so conclusion before conclusion, now here examples has to come before conclusion. Okay, on the basis of your examples, in fact, you are going to conclude. So this is your last bit. So that is the detailed bit of structuring your answer, which we have seen earlier also. Here also I talked about it, and we have repeated a little now in detail about the structure of the answer. Remember this, because this is important. This is how you are going to attempt your answers for your GS paper. All right, now let's see. Okay, now this is again a very, very important bit. This is again a very important bit. How is structuring done? How is structuring done? Okay. Structuring has to be done in two ways. And this is the part on which many students need practice also. You might need more practice for one than the other, but generally students need practice on structuring. Structuring is first and foremost content based, and also it is presentation based. This is something related to what I have told you when we just began. So, and it's important, so that's why it's coming here again. Structuring is content based and presentation based. How are you going to structure your content? Okay, so your introduction, how it has to be there, what points will come in your introduction, what points will come in your body of the answer, what points are you going to conclude with, what will be your examples before conclusion, all that which is going to make sense, that is your content. So your content has to be structured, your content has to be clear, it has to be defined. You can't talk about everything in those 150-250 words, right? Presentation based is what we have discussed here, the structure of the answer. Okay, how are you going to present it? Your intro, body, conclusion, examples. Also, are you going to make use of any diagrams? कई बार होगा कि आंसर पूरा लिख दिया, उसके बाद स्ट्राइक किया, अरे ये सेम चीज़ तो मैं पाई डायग्राम से एक्सप्लेन कर देती. Like I could have written here caste, and I could have written how caste is affecting family, right? Give some example how it affects work, how it is found in education, how it is found in politics, right? Just one example like this. Okay, so कई बार after the answer you realize that you could have done the same thing in a better way through your diagram, through some figures, through some flow charts, right? So वो चीज़ अवॉइड करने के लिए you will have to make your content in your head, and then you will have to see that how are you going to present your content. Okay, what all things are you going to use for the presentation of the content, and these two things make structuring. These two things are structuring your answer. Now what I was telling you initially is there are some students who might have to work more on content. There would be some students who might have to work more on presentation. Some students might have to work on both, which is totally fine. You have to work on both the things. However, कई बार होता है कि we have the content, we don't know how to present. कई बार होता है we know the presentation, we know that we have to make use of these different things, but our content is lacking. ठीक है, सो ऑफ कोर्स राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस करो, बट राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस आप कर सकते हो जब आपके पास डिसेंट कंटेंट है, जब आपके पास सफिशिएंट मैटर है बोलने का, लिखने का, right? So both these things have to go hand in hand, and you have to find out that what is your area of where you are missing. ठीक है, what are you actually missing out on, and you will work on those parts. All right, so that is all basically about structuring your answer. And remember, for each student it is different. Certain points are general, however we all have our own areas of work, and you have to make sure that you develop your skills in those particular areas more. Okay, now let's see. Okay, now these are some of the tips. I have discussed some of the tips with you. Let's see, we can discuss a few more. Add thinkers in your answer. So I've already told you that you must add thinkers in your answer. You must add thinkers in your answer. If you know that this concept was talked about by this thinker, write about it. Write the name. Na? Why are you keeping it to yourself? Knowledge छुपा के तो कुछ होगा नहीं. So add thinker if you have one. Okay, add the thinker in your answer. If you do not remember the name of the thinkers, at least add their school of thought. So sometimes it may happen that you know that this answer is something about conflict perspective, but you have forgotten that who belong to the conflict perspective, who are the thinkers from the conflict perspective. So it's okay, you may not write the thinkers, but you can write that this is the conflict school of thought, okay, or this is the functionalist school of thought, right? You can at least write the school of thought this answer, this question is from, or this point, whatever point you are writing, that point is from what kind of school of thought, what kind of perspective. Now this is particularly about sociology. However, in general you have to make your introduction as to the point for the question as possible. Whatever your question is, if the question is of direct effects of globalization, only write about that. Don't start writing about everything else around globalization, different policies, liberalization, different industries. No, the question is about effects of globalization, just write about globalization, right? Then wherever possible, use key terms. It is like here, use different key terms of that paper. So for example, if it's a question of social justice, right? So make sure you use key terms first about social justice in that answer. If it's a question on, say, rural agrarian transformation or on land reform, make sure you are using the terms, okay? In case of sociology, for example, you can use these terms. For example, if a question on Marx, make sure that you are using and you are talking about DOL, or you're talking about revolution, or you're talking about class consciousness, or you're talking about alienation, you're talking about whatever thing has been asked in the question, okay? Now, if there is a question on women empowerment, Then you can write your introduction like, and this is an example, that sexual division of labor seems to be universal and India is not an exception, as the patriarchal currents flow in all social structures of all the known societies of the world. Now this is a way of introduction. बहुत लंबा इंट्रोडक्शन नहीं है, बहुत डायरेक्ट इंट्रोडक्शन है. इट इज़ अबाउट वुमेन एंड एम्पावरमेंट, राइट? So it's direct about, it directly means it is about gender and work, right? So the two things which are coming across from this is gender and work. And now if you look at the introduction, this 2-line introduction, these two things again become very clear from it, right? So you have talked about sexual division of labor. Within these 3 words, you have covered the gender dimension, you have covered the work dimension. Okay, so you'll have to keep your introduction precise, but it has to make sense. This is just an example. Now some definitions from sociological dictionary, some definitions from the different books that you are reading, those are important, right? And those again help. However, I would again say that if you are doing these definitions, if you are using these different reference books, always rewrite them. Write them in your own writing, write them in your own notes, because whatever you write, you will actually remember that. Okay, that's the best way of remembering things. That's the best way of remembering things, guys. Take it from me that whatever you want to work on, start writing those things. जो आप लिखते हो वो आपको हमेशा याद रहता है, ठीक है? So write those. आपने कोई definition पढ़ी है डिक्शनरी से, कहीं किसी भी reference book से, don't leave it there. Don't say that okay, I have learnt it, that is enough. No, write it in your notes and then you will be able to remember it. Okay? So writing. Now remember some quotations. Now this is again an important point. If you can, and again this is something that you should start doing, is again in your notes making, keep one segment where you are writing these definitions, where you are writing these facts. I've already told you about facts. Let's see, whatever I've told you, what should you write? You are writing facts, you are writing definitions. And one more thing I will ask you to make notes of, and that is quotes. Okay, make notes. Make notes of facts. Keep one segment wherein you are noting down all important facts. Keep one segment where you are writing all important definitions. Keep one segment wherein if whatever quote you come across, if that quote you feel is a quote which can make sense, which you can use, write down that quote. If you are reading something, and not necessarily in your reference books, if you are reading something in newspaper, if you are reading something, a very popular quote by some celebrity, not necessarily older time quotes, earlier time quotes, even current times ka agar, like if a sports person has said something, write it down. Write it down with the name of the speaker. And if you can, whenever in your paper, if you feel that, oh, I can use it here, use it there. Okay, so these are along with your notes on topics, along with the notes on your on the topics of UPSC. These are 3 different areas where you should definitely make your notes: the facts, definitions, and quotes with name of speaker. Right? So your notes, of course, you are going to make notes on the entire UPSC syllabus. However, also make these 3 segments for sure and start making notes here. Then of course, because this is from the perspective of sociology, so that's why it says so, that sociological perspectives, methodologies can be used to write 1 paragraph on each perspective or methodology. Okay, so this is something that if a question is about methodology, then they can be used, but this is more sociological. So for people from sociology, it will be useful for them. Okay, so I hope all this is clear to you. All of this is making sense. Okay, now I think we have a question for you. However, before that, let's first take a look at whatever has been done, and then we will take a look at the question. So I've already told you that this is the course which is beginning from 31st July. Please remember this, share it with your friends. The code is Srirams. The batches will be 3-hour classes from 10 AM onwards. Bilingual batch है 31st July से जो शुरू हो रहा है. Sociology optional card. This is about me. Then these are the few words that I have not discussed today. We will be talking about them later. I will add more words also, and we will talk about them in some other session of ours. Then I told you that for your answers, practice is the most important thing, most important thing. And with practice will affect your speed, practice will help you in gaining confidence, and practice comes with note making, right? So it's not necessary that you always need to pick a question and you start writing on that question. Write your notes. Many students I have seen, this is a new thing nowadays, they type. That's very good because it gives you a lot of time for, you know, कोई भी changes होते हैं तो आपने document में changes कर दिए, it makes sense. However, I'll still suggest you that कुछ चीज़ें होती हैं जो old school होती हैं, and practicing answer writing is one such. If you only type out things, your entire practice will get affected. ठीक है, अगर सिर्फ टाइपिंग करते रहे तो आप प्रैक्टिस कब करोगे, है ना? So typing is okay, you can type certain things, you can type the important parts of the reference books, of the codes. However, as I told you कि certain things, कुछ चीज़ें छोड़ दो जो आप by hand लिख रहे हो, ठीक है? तो उसमें आपके कोड्स आ गए, उसमें आपकी डेफिनेशंस आ गए, फैक्ट्स आ गए, कुछ और ऐसी चीज़ें जो आप कर सकते हो वो आप अपनी बाय हैंड नोट मेकिंग में डालो. हर चीज़ टाइपिंग नहीं होती, ठीक है? Then I've talked to you about the fact that how practice is important. Practice से मतलब है not just विदाउट थिंकिंग वाला प्रैक्टिस कि हम बस रोज़ एक पैराग्राफ लिख रहे हैं, नहीं, दैट इज़ ओके, आप लिख रहे हो, बट उस पैराग्राफ का कोई सेंस है, that is also important, that is equally important. So content in words, you have to practice writing content in words. This was important, as I told you, that are there uniform writing tips? I personally would say there could be a few uniform writing tips, like you have to practice, you have to write content in words, you should know about the time limit for your answers. These are uniform writing tips. However, every student has their own strength. आपकी खुद की एक strength है, आपकी खुद की एक weakness है, आपकी खुद की एक lacking है. And at the beginning of the journey, it is great if you discover that. अगर आप अपनी जो lacking है वो आप शुरू में ही पहचान लो तो you will start working on that lacking, right? So that is why आपके tips differ करेंगे. तो somebody, कोई को होगा जिसको शायद content पे ज़्यादा काम करना होगा, किसी और को शायद presentation पे ज़्यादा काम करना होगा, किसी और को शायद time limit पे ज़्यादा काम करना होगा, right? So all of us have different areas on which we need to work on. So there could be some tips which are universal, but certain things are individual specific. What are they? And this is why I am stressing on this, is क्योंकि कई बार क्या होता है, हम फ्रेंड्स के साथ बातें कर रहे हैं, हमारे सारे फ्रेंड्स तो भाई सिर्फ प्रेजेंटेशन पे वर्क कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, एंड यू आर लाइक नहीं, आई ऑल्सो नीड टू वर्क ऑन प्रेजेंटेशन, एंड आपने अपना गुड डील ऑफ टाइम प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द आंसर पे निकाल दिया, ठीक है, बट प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द आंसर वॉज नेवर योर प्रॉब्लम. योर प्रॉब्लम वॉज से द स्पीड or the content, and you never worked on that because your friends were working on presentation, right? So let them work on presentation, क्योंकि उनका हो सकता है वो प्रॉब्लम है, आपका क्या प्रॉब्लम है आप वो ढूंढो एंड उसके ऊपर स्टार्ट वर्किंग, ठीक है. सो राइटिंग टिप्स ऐसे होंगे. कैन यू लर्न आंसर्स? यू कैन हैव पॉइंट्स इन योर हेड, you cannot learn all answers. Learning without understanding is of no use, remember. A big no. Okay, you cannot learn without understanding. You are not going to retain it. आप उसको, आपका जो रिटेंशन पावर है, ह्यूमन रिटेंशन पावर इतना नहीं होता कि हमें जो चीज़ समझ नहीं आ रही, हमने जिस वो मगअप कर ली तो हम लिखाएंगे नहीं, ठीक है. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन, यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज आस्क्ड इन द क्वेश्चन, एंड अकॉर्डिंगली यू विल फ्रेम योर आंसर, ठीक है. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द कॉन्सेप्ट, दैट इज़ अ बेसिक डिमांड, ठीक है. Of course, you can have some points in place. You can learn thinkers' name. You can learn their book's name. You can learn certain facts. Okay? You can't learn concepts. You have to understand concepts. Okay? You can't learn theories. You have to understand theories. ओके अभी बोलते बोलते मुझे ध्यान आया कि व्हेन यू आर लर्निंग द थिंकर्स नेम्स, व्हेन यू आर लर्निंग दैट बुक्स, ऑल्सो मेक श्योर योर स्पेलिंग्स. किसी चीज़ की स्पेलिंग सही है या नहीं बहुत मैटर करता है एग्जामिनर को, बिकॉज इट मेक्स सेंस इफ it should show that you actually know the thinker, you actually know the concept, so your spellings have to be right. Okay, so please ensure that you are writing in the correct manner, you are working on your spellings. And this is again a problem with many students, क्योंकि again हमारी writing habit छूट गई है, हम चीज़ें टाइप करते हैं, टाइपिंग में the technology is such that everything is autocorrect, right? Everything is autocorrect. That doesn't happen in examination. In examination autocorrect option नहीं है, you have to correct it yourself. So ensure that your spellings are right. Okay, I've already talked to you about time limit and speed. That time limit and speed are important. We have to take care about the number of questions that you have to attempt. If by chance you have given a lot of time to one question, try and compensate on the other questions. Okay, rather than leaving an entire question at the end, try and compensate your time somewhere. Okay, तो आपको अपनी speed और time limit का ध्यान balance में चलना होगा to ensure that you are able to attempt all the questions. Also try and attempt all the questions. That is one of the basic things. Okay, don't leave out on matter. Okay, try and attempt it. Structuring of the question, I've already told you that introduction is a must. A very comprehensive, a very direct introduction, the main body. Now how do you present the body in terms of your paragraphs, in terms of your bullets? You may use flowcharts, you may use diagrams. If a question demands you to write the answer in table, please make use of the tabular way of presentation, and then examples and a fitting conclusion, right? So do add examples here. And then a balanced conclusion, especially if you are taking a standpoint, if it is something wherein you have to take a side of something, you mention the pros, mention the cons, and then give a balanced conclusion. Okay, criticize means you have to mention all of this, critically analyze. Okay, जो words हैं question के वो मैंने आज discuss नहीं किए, we'll be discussing them. In those I'll be telling you that how all these words, even though the content is similar, अगर क्रिटिकली एनालाइज होगा तो चीज़ें थोड़ी सी अलग हो जाएंगी, अगर जस्टिफाई होगा चीज़ें थोड़ी सी अलग हो जाएंगी. ठीक है, so this was the thing basically, that how do you actually go about answering your answers, and this works across GS guys. This works across your GS, this will work across your optional papers. So that's why it is very important to understand these things and try and put them to practice. So now on when you are attempting any of these test series, अगर आप कोर्स में एनरोल होते हो तो जब मैं क्वेश्चंस दूंगी, अगर आप वो क्वेश्चंस अटेम्प्ट करते हो, ट्राई एंड मेक यूज ऑफ दीज पॉइंट्स फ्रॉम नाउ ऑनवर्ड्स इटसेल्फ. ओके, एंड वन थिंग आई मिस्ड आउट ऑन सेइंग राइट नाउ वाज टाइमिंग योरसेल्फ. Okay, please remember, when you are attempting these questions, when you are attempting any paper now, practice papers, time yourself, and time yourself not only in terms of the entire paper, in terms of the question, that what kind of question is taking you how long. Okay, so that you can work in those areas. This was about structure of the answer. I think we have discussed this in detail. Structure of the answer, I told you structuring is content and presentation based. You have to find out where you have to work more. So certain other tips. So these are the tips, like how you can gain brownie points by adding like a thinker's name. You can use their the name of their work. Use examples, especially in particular to India. That's even better. But even otherwise, and then okay. Now we have in front of us one example. Okay, we have in front of us one example. Let's take a look at this. All of you can read it. This is the question. This is the question. And let's see how all of you will attempt it. Let's see. Now, the question is, examine gender, ethnicity and race as major dimensions of social stratification. Okay, now this is a question, it's of course it's connected with sociology, but at the same time such a question can very well be a part of your GS 1 or 3. Okay, it can come anywhere, and these are topics: gender, ethnicity, race, stratification. These are topics which can actually come in ways more than one, right? So that's why these topics are important. Now you have to examine these dimensions as dimensions of social stratification. बहुत decent question है, बहुत clear question है. It's not a very complex question, and that is why I'm beginning with such a question. We will gradually in other sessions we'll take more complicated question, but right now I thought it's better to begin with the more direct and a comparatively easier question. Okay, we all know stratification, that society में stratification है, तो इसमें ज़्यादा हमें दिमाग लगाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. It is a no brainer as it's written here. ठीक है. Now you have to write a general answer in your GS paper. However, if you can add a sociological perspective, if you are from the background of sociology, that is great, it works for you. If not, even writing a general answer can work for you in such a case. Okay, so now let's see. For example, it expects you to write certain things from a sociological perspective. General answer हर कोई लिख देगा, तो आपको उतने जनरल आंसर के जितने पॉइंट्स मिल जाएंगे, मार्क्स मिल जाएंगे. बट नहीं, आर वी हैप्पी विद दैट? नो. You want to work more, you want to gain more, right? So you would be writing and you would try and write it in more detail, and you would require sociological perspective for it. Okay, so you will begin, of course, you will explain first and foremost this important term, that is stratification. So you will define stratification. After that you will come to these terms. So you will define gender, you will define ethnicity, you will define race. Not only generally, but also you will try and give perspectives. Okay, so you can use different thinkers. You can explain gender, say for example from the point of view of Sherry Ortner or anybody else. There are several scholars who have worked on gender. You can explain ethnicity from a certain thinker. You can explain race from the perspective of a certain thinker. Okay, so you will first and foremost you will define these terms. Then, as it is said, you will substantiate your stand with thinkers. So David and Moore, especially when you are talking about stratification, these are two names जो instantly आ जाने चाहिए आपके दिमाग में. अगर stratification लिखा है यहाँ पे, तो David and Moore should come to you instantly. Okay, then there is Roald Dahl, there's Weber, there's Marx. All of them can be used and they can be quoted here. Along with them, there are several other thinkers. So you can use, as I told you, Ortner. You can use Laura Mulvey. There are many more thinkers who can be used here. Now this question, when it is asking you to examine these terms, it does not ask you to criticize anything, right? It is just asking you to examine, explain, examine. Don't stop only at examination. Go a step further. And what is that step? That step is about criticism. That when you are explaining gender, try and give critical understanding of gender. Okay, so you will give criticisms of the understanding of gender. You will give criticisms of understanding of ethnicity. You will try and give criticisms of understanding of race, existence of race. Okay, so all of these things can be criticized, and criticisms are going to make your answer more complete. Criticisms are going to make your answer more, they are going to make it fuller. Again, remember in the structure you had a balanced conclusion. So this is what is going to lead you to a balanced conclusion. So you have examined them, you have explained them, and now you are going to critically analyze them. So you are also going to give their criticisms. Okay, that is what will make it a balanced answer. Now a common meeting point of GS and sociology answers is, and another important bit here is current affairs. Current affairs. Okay, make use of current affairs, guys. Please ensure that you all are making use of current affairs. Okay, that's the most important thing. Current affairs in case of race, gender, ethnicity. So in case of India, for example, right now we all are aware about it, cookie meti ethnicity. There are gender issues going on, like say also in terms of your sports, in terms of equal pay. There are several other examples which you can use to elaborate gender, ethnicity and race. Okay, so remember, first and foremost, what you have done, you have defined them. So you defined stratification, you went on defining gender, you went on defining race, and you will also, sorry, it's not mentioned here, you will also define ethnicity. How come ethnicity is not mentioned here? Okay, then you will substantiate your points with thinkers. Then your answer does not end here. You might think that I have explained the concepts, I have given the thinkers, enough. No, you must give criticism, and yes, examples are the most important in UPSC. I have told you this initially also, that try and use examples. Try and use examples from contemporary times. Make use of them. Try to connect them with the question, and after that, here it is missing, after that you will be writing a balanced conclusion. So examples के through आप conclusion पे पहुँच सकते हो. ठीक है, so your conclusion can be based on the way you have explained the work, the way you have explained these terms, their connection with each other, their criticisms, and how you see them in society through these different examples, and therefore what do you conclude about them. Okay, so then will be your conclusion. Okay, so make sure that you follow this kind of a structure for a complete answer. Moving on, so this is other example, let's talk about this later. I think today we'll stop here. We'll talk about some of these things again in another session, and I'll take up more questions then, and we'll discuss how do you write, how do you frame those questions in that session. But I hope all of you who are aiming for UPSC mains, you all get benefited from this video. And remember, sociology optional batch from this on behalf of Srirams, we are beginning from July 31st, and please feel free to use this code and share it with whosoever, your friends, your peers who are interested. Share it with them, and the details will be shared below. And we'll meet soon for some other such session wherein I'll take other we'll touch different areas for answer writing. All right, so thank you so much everyone. I'll take your leave now. Yes, thank you.